What if I told you that most people consider Sunday to be a day of rest, a time for recharging, or spending time with family and church? But then, what if I told you that Sunday, April 6, 1862, would start one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, and in its wake, give rise to numerous stories of spirits who are still fighting this battle to this day? Welcome to Ghost of Tennessee, and this is the haunted Shiloh battlefield. Camped along the Tennessee River at a town known as Pittsburgh Landing, now better known as Shiloh due to a log church about 3 miles inland from the landing. General Grant's army were awaiting reinforcements from Major General Don Carlos Buell. The day seemed peaceful and calm, with most men sleeping in, and there had been some shots in the distance when it was still dark, but no one really took notice. Probably a nervous guard or two is all. Suddenly, without warning, blood-curdling yells broke the peace. Confederate General Albert Sidney Johnston had realized that his only hope of victory was to strike before Buell's army reached Shiloh. At 6 a.m., 3 lines of Confederates charged out of the woods. The element of surprise initially worked to the Confederates' benefit. Several Union officers ran back to camp shouting, "The rebels are out there thicker than fleas on a dog's back." And they immediately began taking up a series of defensive lines to slow the Confederate attacks. Johnston would direct a series of attacks against the Union troops, holding the area around a peach orchard. He had decided to personally lead his regiment, the 45th Tennessee Infantry, in a bayonet charge against what came to be known as the Hornet's Nest. And he successfully drove Grant's army back several hundred yards. He returned to his staff flushed with excitement, with several bullet holes in his uniform, but no visible injuries. He then sent his staff to various parts of the battlefield, but he remained behind the battle line. The first of his staff to return, volunteer aide and Tennessee Governor Isham G. Harris, found the general slumped in his saddle. Harris asked, "General, are you wounded?" Johnston glanced down at his leg wound, then faced Harris and said his last words in a weak voice, "Yes, and I fear seriously." Harris led him to a ravine and laid him under a tree, where Johnston died a short time later. During the charge, a ball had entered Johnston's leg just above his boot and severed an artery. No one thought to apply a tourniquet, and interestingly enough, Johnston had one in his pocket. He was killed about 2:30 p.m., and General P.G.T. Beauregard assumed command. The Confederate Army, now under command of General Beauregard, succeeded in pushing the remaining Union troops back to the Tennessee River. It was getting dark, and surveying the situation, Beauregard surmised that he could easily wipe out the remaining troops the following morning. The sun rose the next day on a Federal force of nearly 50,000, as Buell's reinforcements had arrived during the night. This huge force now faced Beauregard's 30,000 troops, and slowly but surely, Union forces sliced into the Confederates, with the troops falling back all the way to Corinth, Mississippi. The battlefield was thoroughly littered with the dead and dying, more than had ever been killed in any war previously fought by the United States. The Battle of Shiloh was over. It had cost both sides a combined total of 23,746 men killed, wounded, or missing. This would be a devastating defeat for the Confederates. After the war, General Beauregard returned to the house in New Orleans that now bears his name. In 1893, the year of the general's death, people walking by the house late at night reported hearing the voice. Someone seemed to be gasping, "Shiloh, Shiloh," over and over in a raspy chant that sounded as if it were coming from a great distance. Who else could the voice belong to but General P.G.T. Beauregard, the man who throughout his life was haunted by the demons of the battle he needlessly lost. On December 27, 1894, Shiloh National Military Park was established. Within the park is the Shiloh Indian Mounds. 6 rectangular mounds that served as platforms for the town's important buildings. A town that existed before Shiloh, before the Civil War. The buildings are believed to have been a council house, religious buildings, and homes for the significant leaders. Visitors have reported freezing cold gusts of wind, even during the heat of summer. They have spotted colorful orbs darting in and out of the ground, hovering above the mounds, and if you listen carefully, you can hear the hushed sound of tribal singing and drums. Others have said they hear random gunshots and cannon blasts in the distance, and the distinct smell of gunpowder on the air. Is it possible the ghosts of the soldiers may be trapped on the grounds, still fighting the war? Could the men who died during those 2 horrific days of fighting still be walking the park, searching for a way for freedom and to escape? Other hot spots within the park include a site known as Bloody Pond, a spot where hundreds of wounded and dying Union and Confederate soldiers made their way to clean their wounds and get a sip of water. It's said that there were so many injured and dying at the pond that the water turned blood red. And even today, at certain times of the year, the water will take on a red hue, and visitors claim to hear moaning and cries for help. Another site is known as the Primitive Cabin. Numerous guests have reported walking into the cabin and spotting a young boy peering down from the loft. He runs down the steps and out the door and disappears. And near the tree where General Johnston took his last breath, some even claim they've seen a Confederate officer looking confused, looking for his men. So, would you walk the grounds of Shiloh National Battlefield? Who knows? You might just get a glimpse of one of the bloodiest battles of Civil War history. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed it, give me a like, follow, and share.